Have you ever heard of the term superfood? You heard that thrown out a lot, superfoods. The term is, I think, meant to make you feel like eating this food will do something just short of magic inside of your body, right? If you just eat that food. What blew me away, though, so I did a little research on it, the term was actually coined in 1917. So over 100 years ago was this first superfood, and you'll never guess what it was. The first superfood was a banana. That's banana. They're trying to get people to put bananas on everything. And they were touting all the health benefits of that. But since then, every couple of years, a new food gets touted as a superfood. I just want to give you a little list here of some of the ones recently. So in 2008, it was the acai berry. S-A-C-A-I, what? I don't care. So many antioxidants, though. So super amount of antioxidants in that one. In 2012, it was kale. That's when kale happened. Remember that? Kale happened 2012. Why? Because it's a leaf that tastes worse than lettuce, and it must be healthy, right? Like that's all I got for that one. Also in 2012 was coconut oil, which is not a food, I don't think. Please don't tell me it is. But evidently, coconut oil could do anything. And if you don't know, Lauren Deshawn runs our kids ministry, and she believes in coconut oil, like Jesus, coconut oil right here. To the point that I think if you were literally like shot and bleeding, she would like, have you tried coconut oil? She would for real. Every single thing she thinks that it can solve. In 2013, it was quinoa, maybe? I think that's how you pronounce that. I don't know why. Gluten-free and it has protein in it, probably. In 2015, it was the avocado. That's when avocados happened. Remember that? And now, pretentious people put it on toast. So that's where the world we live in. Also in 2015 was something called matcha green tea. Why are you saying yes? So I shouldn't make fun of this because King Street sells this. I don't know if you know this. Our cafe right over there sells this. And I make fun of it anyways, and I'm going to make fun of it anyways, but I just want you to know that Joy, who helps run King Street over there, if you don't know Joy, she, in between services, walked over to the cafe and made me some. All right, so look at it. Just look at it. If you've never seen it before. Here, I'll put the logo up front. This is the only thing I don't recommend at King Street Cafe. I'm gonna try it. You're gonna experience this with me. Oh my gosh. Okay. See, it's not, okay, when you first, it's okay. It's the aftertaste that gets you. It's the aftertaste. So here's what this is. Here's my theory. Does anybody want this? I'm not even kidding. I took one sip. I'll put it right here. If you want it, you can come get it. Okay, yeah. We have a winner. And you know what? There are no germs on that because it's a superfood, so you're fine. Here's my theory as to what that is. So you know how cows have 7 stomachs, and they chew their cud in between each one, right? So what matcha tea is, what Joy just did is she went out to a field somewhere, she found a cow that was between the 6th and 7th stomach, and it spit up into that cup. And then she put some like sugar in it, and that's the only reason it tastes even remotely good. I'm sorry, Joy, but for real, the aftertaste is gross. I have this theory that the harder a food is to pronounce, the more likely it is to become a superfood because it like adds to the mystery of what it is. But they're almost all overhyped. They're almost all overpromised. The benefits are overstated. It's more of a marketing term than it is a nutritional thing. You just need to keep that in mind. However, I like the idea of a superfood. I don't think that any of these really do what they all say they're going to do, but I like the idea of them because they're supposed to work on multiple levels. They're supposed to help you with a lot of different things. I think there's like 5. It's like heart health, strong immune system, cancer prevention, reduced inflammation, and lower cholesterol. They're almost all of them like promise some of those things, all of those things. Like it's good for you nutritionally and it has healing powers. But if you define a superfood as something that is good for you on multiple levels, I actually think there are foods that fit that definition. They just don't get the hype. Like spinach is one. Spinach, nobody's ever going to call spinach a superfood, except for Popeye. He was right. But a superfood that is not hyped, I actually eat spinach every day. in a smoothie, ground up, so I can't taste it at all. Just disappears into that. But spinach is good for you on multiple levels. Broccoli is good for you on multiple levels. Not worth it, but broccoli is good for you on multiple levels. And then blueberries and bananas are good for you on multiple. There's lots of foods that you could call superfoods. And I started thinking, like, what would be the equivalent, spiritually speaking? What would be a spiritual superfood? Something that's good for you on multiple levels that maybe doesn't get enough hype. So what I want to do for the next 2 weeks is talk to you about a spiritual superfood. And I don't think it's an overstatement. I don't think it's an exaggeration. I think if you got really good at this one thing, it would absolutely change your life. It would absolutely change your life. Benefits on multiple different levels. I don't think I can overstate it. The spiritual superfood that I want to talk to you about today and next week is gratitude. Gratitude. Now, you've probably heard gratitude's good for you, right? You've probably heard some of the benefits. You've probably heard you're supposed to have it. So I don't want to spend a ton of time like selling it to you. I want to spend a little time telling you how important it is for you, but we're gonna zoom towards how to be grateful here in a minute. But real quick, I want to just share some things that gratitude does that I think are actually kind of surprising. So gratitude, the first thing you need to know about gratitude is this: it's like an antidote to toxic thoughts and emotions. It's like an antidote to toxic thoughts and emotions. Like gratitude is mutually exclusive with a lot of the negative stuff that happens inside of you, mentally and emotionally. And what I mean by that is if gratitude is present, the other thing can't be present. So if gratitude is present, envy can't be present. Gratitude and cynicism can't coexist, can't have them both at the same time. Gratitude and materialism can't happen at the same time. Gratitude and narcissism can't happen at the same time. You already knew that. Not because you're a narcissist, but because other people. Gratitude and entitlement can't exist at the same time. Gratitude and anxiety cannot coexist, believe it or not. Gratitude and greed can't coexist. These things can't happen at the same time. So if gratitude is present, the other things have to leave. It's kind of like antiseptic on a wound or turning a light on in a dark room. It banishes these other things. It's actually that powerful. In the moment, gratitude really does eliminate all of these other things. The verse of the year in the YouVersion Bible app, I don't know if you know they do a verse of the year. It's the most popular verse that people have looked up or shared. Is Philippians 4:6. I'm also going to read you 7. We've read this a lot lately, but it's really important. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will receive God's peace. You will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. So I know we always focus on the idea that, hey, don't worry, pray, and that is the good, important exchange, and we talked about that recently. But notice that it also said, hey, tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. The gratitude plays a role in your mental and emotional well-being. And it's a really important role, really important role. Gratitude changes things in here. And it's not just good for your mental and emotional health, it's also good for your physical body, which is a crazy thing to believe. And this is not like a Christian thing. This is like a scientific study thing. So this is not a bunch of Christians and their Bibles. This is people out in the world doing studies, and they're discovering what the Bible has been saying for years. So gratitude, believe it or not, reduces stress. It boosts immune function, it improves your sleep quality, it lowers your blood pressure, and it enhances your pain management. Isn't that crazy? Like, it feels like it has nothing to do with those things, but in some way it affects all of that going on inside of your physical body. Like, that's to the point where if like I went to the doctor and he's like, hey buddy, you have high blood pressure. I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, well, have you tried being grateful? Like, no. Like, is that really? But according to studies, people who are grateful have reduced all of these things. Like, it actually does this kind of good in your physical body. It almost sounds too good to be true, but it's real. Gratitude seems to affect every part of your life. Every part of your life. Now, there's a paradigm shift we have to have when it comes to gratitude, and it has to do with cause and effect. We tend to when we see that two things are related, we sometimes mix up cause and effect. We'll notice that two things have something to do with each other, and then we mix up what causes which one. So for example, educated people have more money. Have you heard this? Like, educated people have more money. We know that those two things are related, that education and having more money are related. And it would be really easy to make the assumption, well, if you're more educated, you're going to have more money. And that's what we tell all the kids because we want them to stay in school and do all that stuff, right? But actually, what the studies have actually found is actually the reverse, that people with more money have access to better education. So it might be that we've mixed up the cause and the effect. Now, that one's not very important to you, but let me hit a little closer to home. You may have said the sentence in your life, well, I just have really low energy, so I don't work out. And you know those two things are related, right? Working out and energy levels, there's some kind of connection there. So you're making the assumption, my energy level is causing me not to work out. But every study shows that it's actually the reverse, that if you would start working out, you'd have higher energy. So the cause is your lack of working out. The effect is your low energy. And we mix these things up sometimes. Well, I think we do this with gratitude, and this is really important, really important. We do it with gratitude and happiness. We think that happy people are grateful people, and happiness causes gratitude. And we have this kind of stuck in our minds that, well, you see all these happy people, of course they're grateful, look at how happy they are, of course they're grateful. But what if that's reversed? And you really need to think about the implications of this. If that's reversed, what if it's not that gratitude is the effect? What if gratitude is the cause? That gratitude actually produces the happiness. So you look at the happiness, you think, well, of course they're grateful, but what if it's the grateful that actually caused it? So if you ask that chicken or the egg question, which came first, happiness or gratitude? What if the answer is gratitude? That gratitude came first. And what you've been doing, you've been making the mistake of waiting. I'm going to wait to be grateful until I have a reason to be grateful. I'm going to wait to be grateful until I'm happy, and then gratitude will just flow out of me. But what if if you do it that way, you're going to be waiting forever? Because gratitude is actually one of the things that causes happiness in your life. This means, and listen to this, that your gratitude level is more important to your happiness than your circumstances. Your gratitude level is more important to your happiness than all the stuff that's going on out here. That's crazy. I wish I could blend that up and have you drink that. Like that is that important of a truth. That your happiness level is not about accumulation, but about appreciation. Your happiness level is not about accumulation, all the things that you can get, but it's about appreciation. The great theologian Sheryl Crow was right, okay? You remember that line? What is it? It's not having what you want, it's wanting what you've got. She was right. She was right. You've got it reversed. You're waiting to be grateful until you're happy, but you actually need to start being grateful, and it will produce the happiness. You've got cause and effect backwards here. Now, is that shallow? You go into church like, well, pastor talked about being happy. Being happy means being grateful. I actually had somebody kind of tell me that was shallow on Thursday. So I added some deep stuff. I don't think it's that shallow. I'm grateful for him, though. So let's go a little deeper. I actually think I think it is a deep spiritual truth to say that your gratitude causes your happiness. This affects your overall well-being, how you look at life. But let's dive into two deep spiritual things. So here's your first big, deep spiritual thing. You ever wonder what God's will for your life is? That's a big question, right? That's the deepest question you can ask, And you think about it in terms of like decades and half centuries, right? Like, what is God's will for my life? Who should I marry? What job should I have? Where should I live? Those big kind of questions that you ask yourself. What's God's will for my life? You think about this stuff, you're sitting around a campfire late at night, and those are the thoughts that pop in your mind. Or when you're driving to work in the morning on a Monday morning, you're like, what is God's will for my life? Not this, right? You have those kind of thoughts, and those are big thoughts, right? Well, I actually know the answer. Well, part of the answer. 1 Thessalonians 5:18, look at this. Be thankful in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you who belong to Christ Jesus. Be thankful in all circumstances. That's God's will. That's how important gratitude is. I mean, think about that. The guy who's writing this, he elevated now gratitude to a piece of God's will for your life. This isn't just some add-on. This isn't just some extra credit thing. This is God's will for your life. And I know, again, we tend to think of God's will for our life as some big, massive thing. But what if you reduce it down just to every moment? If you ask the question, what in this moment is God's will for my life? What if you just lived in that present and said, what is God's will for my life in this moment? And I would say a piece of the answer to that is always gratitude. Gratitude on some level is a part of what God wants for you every moment of your life. Now, notice, it said be thankful in all circumstances. It didn't say be thankful for all circumstances. And that's an important thing because you might be going through it and being like, I'm not grateful for this, and I get it. But it doesn't say to be grateful for the awful things in your life. It says that even when awful things are happening, you can find things to be grateful for. That is a part of why God created you. I mean, think about that your natural state as a Christian, your natural state as a human being is meant to be grateful. That's deep. Second deeply spiritual thing is found in Psalm 100, verse 4. You've heard this before. It's in a Christian song if you grew up in church. Enter his gates with thanksgiving. Go into his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. So let me say this a different way. The correct way to approach God is with gratitude. That's the correct posture as you approach God. It includes gratitude. Entering that throne room of heaven, when those big doors swing open and you are going to God in prayer, the way to approach him is with gratitude. And you know this is important if you have kids. Because if you have kids, have you ever had your kid come up to you and ask you something that is completely reasonable and maybe needs to be done? But the way they come up to you and the way they ask it, you just want to say no. Is anybody a terrible parent like me? Yeah, you should get that, but no, because you act in a horrible way. Actually, my kids don't even ask. My kids don't form things. They're not questions. They're always statements. You need to can you rewrite that in the form of a question? Because it make me a little more likely to say yes. So let me give you a real obscure Office reference. If you get this one, you've watched it too many times. So, and I don't remember the exact scenario, but Michael is angry about something. He's going to Daryl, who runs the warehouse, and he walks up to Daryl and he says, "Hey, idiot." And Daryl, cool as a cucumber, start over. Just start over. I wish I could have that in my parenting. Start over. Usually I'm angry, but I wish I could just be start over. That's not, and I wonder if we need to kind of do that with God sometimes, that we approach the wrong way. We kind of have the wrong attitude. We come at God at the wrong angle, and we just need to back and be all right, I'm gonna start over here, God. I'm gonna include some gratitude for what you've done in my life before I begin with all the other stuff. And here's the thing. Maybe you're going through it, and I know there are seasons where you can just be really down. But if you're a Christian, there are 3 things that you can always be grateful for that are outside of your circumstances. God created you, God loves you, and Jesus died for you. Those are your baseline, right? You approach God, you have those 3 things that you can come to. Hey, God, thank you that I exist. I didn't have to, and you did that anyways. Thank you that you love me. I'm blown away by that. I don't even get that. And thank you for Jesus, for my ability to have a relationship with you and a future home in heaven and all that. Thank you for all that. You can approach God with that no matter what is happening in your life. You have that. That's the basement level of gratitude. And that's pretty high for us. So we always come, the way we approach God, I believe the way you were created to be is to be grateful. And I think any other way, if you're not grateful, it's like a joint that's out, like a dislocated shoulder, a finger that's disjointed, it's wrong. The right way for you to be that orients you properly is to have a grateful heart, a grateful heart. And just so you know, this is a pastor thing that I've noticed, and maybe it's something I need to get better at, but the people I have the hardest time helping are the people who think that God owes them something. I don't know how to do it. Because there's nowhere to go from there because God doesn't owe us anything. God is all powerful and sits high above everything, but the people who have picked something in their life that they don't have, that they're mad at God for not having, and they just act like God owes them that thing, I don't know where to go with that. And I just want you to know my observation about all of those people, especially when it becomes the thing, when it becomes the thing that defines their relationship with God. Because I'm not saying you might have a little thing here or there, but when it becomes the thing that defines their relationship with God, this thing I don't have that God should have given me, that God should give me, and I can't believe he hasn't given it to me, and I'm mad at him for not giving it to me. And I'm going to be mad until he gives it to me. If it's that kind of a thing, I just want you to know, those people, I've never met one whose life isn't a mess. I've never met one whose relationships aren't a mess, and I've never met one whose spiritual life isn't a mess. Because that's the wrong, it's like a shoulder out of joint. Their whole spiritual existence is just wrong because they have an entitled attitude towards God instead of a grateful one, and that just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Like throwing a bucket of water on the fire of your spiritual life. So I guess, saying, if you want to improve your relationship with God, increase your gratitude. Find things to be thankful to him for. It will move the needle of your spiritual life. So speaking of, here's what I want to do. I'm guessing on some level you already knew that gratitude was important. I'm guessing on some level you already knew that gratitude was good for you. I'm guessing on some level you already knew that you're supposed to be grateful for stuff in your life. But what you really need is to know how. How can I do this? So I have three things that will, I hope, improve your gratitude, and the last one is surprising. That's my hook to keep you engaged. The last one's surprising. You really will be surprised. You ever see those videos, list of 10 things, number 7 will blow you away. That's what I just did. You have to pay attention now. All right, so 3 things to improve your gratitude. First one, I just want to give you one word for each one. First one is practice, the word practice. The reason I picked practice, so if you've been a Christian for a while, how many sermons have you heard that the title of the sermon is Attitude of Gratitude? You heard that sermon before? Yes, you've heard this. You've heard that sermon 100 times before. So have I. I actually watched one this morning when I was on the treadmill. I turned on a sermon, and it was called Attitude of Gratitude. Turned it off in 5 minutes. Here's the thing. I don't know if you know this is a weird thing about pastors. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of an attitude of gratitude, but I wonder if the reason that little phrase has become popular is not because it's actually a helpful way to think about gratitude, and it maybe has more to do with just the fact that it rhymes. And this is a terrible thing about pastors. We love stuff that rhymes, and we love alliteration, all the words starting with the same letter. We're terrible that we just love that so much that maybe if there's a better way to explain it, we'll still go with a worse way to explain it just because it rhymes. And horrible, I know. So I think that attitude of gratitude is actually a worse way for you to, the paradigm in your mind, attitude of gratitude is probably not the best way for you to think about it. I think it would be better for you to think about gratitude as a practice. It's a practice. Because practice, attitude for me, and I say this full well knowing I have teenagers that I tell them the opposite. Sometimes I feel like I can't control my attitude. I tell my teenagers they can all the time, but I feel like you wake up and you're just I'm in a bad mood. What happened? Nothing. I literally woke up. There's nothing, right? Nothing's happened, but it just kind of happens on the inside, right? Attitude, and I know you can work at that. But a lot of times it feels like something I can't control. So if we talk about gratitude as if it's an attitude, it kind of sometimes would feel like, I just can't today. But if we talk about gratitude as something you practice, practice is something you can do all the time, and you're continually improving at it, right? I haven't attained that attitude of gratitude that I've heard. So I haven't reached that destination yet, but I am practicing gratitude. I'm getting better at it day by day, and I want to continue to improve that. So it's more about a journey than it is a destination if we talk about it as if it is a practice that I have not yet mastered. The other reason I like the idea of practice is because gratitude is not our natural state. It's not. We are not naturally grateful. We are not naturally thankful. We are naturally entitled. We are naturally complainers. We're not born grateful. And if you're offended by that, I'm grateful. If you think that human beings are born grateful, you don't have kids. Cool. Keep it up. Just keep that fantasy, right? But anybody who has kids knows they're not born grateful, right? That doesn't come to... if you've got a kid like that, you've got an angel. I have to beat the complaining out of them, right? Like you can't possibly think that a kid's just born coming out like, thank you, mommy, for life, and for getting me everything and answering all my questions and doing everything even at the sake of your own mental health and physical health. Like you've never heard a kid talk like that before, ever, right? They're not that. You have to train them. And that means if they're not that, neither were you. Which means you're on the same journey that they're on, just a little further down the road, right? If you weren't born grateful, you got to work towards being grateful. And that's why I think practice is important. Gratitude is going to be you swimming upstream. It's not going to come naturally. And it's not some attitude that you can adjust. I think it takes work and it takes practice, and maybe attitude is someday you might reach that. Colossians 4:2 says, devote yourselves to prayer. With an alert mind and a thankful heart, devote yourselves to prayer. That implies there's going to be some work there. There's going to be some grind there. You're going to have to work at this, practice this. Gratitude doesn't come naturally. So the first word, practice. I believe practice is in order. Second word that I want to give you to improve your gratitude is the word focus. The word focus. I believe that gratitude is more of a product of focus than it is of anything else in your life. Gratitude is more a product of focus than anything else in your entire life. Here's how I know. Have you ever met somebody who has less than you, has a worse situation than you, but they're happier than you? You ever met somebody like that? Annoying, isn't it? What are they doing? How? You ever wonder how they do it? How are they able to be happier even though they have less and have a worse situation than you? Well, it's a matter of focus. They have less good, but they're more focused on their less good than you are on your more good. They're actually more focused on the less good that they have in their life than you are focused on the more good that you have in your life. And they're enjoying their less good life more than you are enjoying your more good life. That's crazy. They're winning, right? They're just winning. That's why it's annoying. That's why you don't like it, right? Because you realize they have something. Well, all it is focus. And maybe a part of the problem, again, all this has to do with paradigms that we have and ways we think about things that maybe hinder our ability to do this right. And one of them is the metaphors we use for life. And so there's one, and it's super popular. We talk about life as if it's hills and valleys. Right? Hills and valleys. We talk about that all the time. And I'm not dogging on that. Listen, the Bible even kind of talks about valleys and stuff like that. So I'm not totally down on that. The problem is when we kind of go all or nothing with that kind of stuff, I'm either on a hilltop or I'm way down in a valley. And it's like we allow that to paint everything that we're experiencing. And I'm not saying that there aren't those kind of things, right? You have mountaintop experiences. Yep. You have valleys where life is worse and it feels dark, and that is real. But let's be honest, most of your life is lived somewhere between a mountaintop and a valley, right? Most of our life is not spent way up here or way down here. Most of our life is somewhere in between, isn't it? I mean, I want to say the vast majority of our life. If you're like, no, I live in the valley, I'm like, okay, you can come out. We're okay with it. But I believe for the normal human, most of your life is lived somewhere between a mountain and a valley. But if we have this all or nothing mentality, it kind of hurts our ability to think about the way things are. That's why when somebody asks you, how you doing? It's hard to answer, isn't it? Because the answer is almost never all bad or all good. The answer is almost always it's complicated. The answer is almost always it's a mixed bag. And that's true. So what if a better metaphor would be, instead of hills and valleys, what if you thought about your life like railroad tracks? And one rail is the good and one rail is the bad. And you just always have your feet on both. Never is there a time where you're picking your foot up. There's always, even if you're in a dark season, there was always a little bit of good. Even if you're a good season, there was always a little bit of bad. You always got both present. Always have both present. You might lean one way or the other, but you always have good and bad in your life. And if that's true, then no matter what's happening, you have the ability to focus your attention on some of the good things in your life. You can actually choose to focus on the things that are good. Proverbs 4:25 says, look straight ahead and fix your eyes on what lies before you. Obviously, this verse is encouraging you to look ahead in your life, but I just want to point out the idea that it's telling you that you can choose where your eyes go. You can choose that. You have the ability to focus your thoughts. You have the ability to choose what you dwell on. And if it's true that your life is railroad tracks and you got one rail that's good and one rail that's bad, then you have the ability to choose to focus on the parts that are good and choose to be grateful for the parts that are good. And here's the effect that could have, and this is so important. If you start to do that, and this is going to take practice, to say, I'm going to focus on the good, I'm going to focus on being grateful for the good, what will happen is that new car effect. You know the new car effect when you get a new car and you get in and you start driving around and then you start seeing that car everywhere? Isn't that crazy? You're such a trendsetter that everybody else bought the car, right? But it's not that, right? It's just that now you're seeing it. Before you bought that car, you didn't see it. Matter of fact, to you, it barely existed. But once you got in that car and you started noticing that car, you saw it everywhere. So it went from barely existing in your reality to now you see it all the time. And that's what happens when you start to look for stuff. So what if now that's scary a little bit, isn't it? Because if it's true of cars, that literally there's a car brand out there and make and model out there that you didn't even really realize existed until you got it, and now that you got it, you see it everywhere? What if the same thing applies to things that you should be grateful for? That before you start intentionally looking for them, they are functionally invisible to you. That you don't even know they exist until you start looking. And then once you actually start working on the focus part and you start saying, no, I'm going to look for things to be grateful for. I'm going to actually hunt these things down. I'm going to actually focus my thoughts on the good parts of my life. That all of a sudden your eyes kind of open up and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much more here than I thought there would be. That what was invisible is now visible, what things that I didn't even think exist actually do exist, and they're everywhere. What if that's the effect it would have? That if you actually really get good at practicing your focus, that all of a sudden your life's going to open up and you're going to realize there's way more good there than you thought before, and there's way more to be grateful for than you realized, because you're fixing your focus. Fixing your focus. And if you keep at it, man, one day you could be described as a person who has an attitude of gratitude. And we'll all be jealous. All right, so practice and focus. All right, last thing that can help you in your gratitude, and this is so counterintuitive. Matter of fact, I think a lot of pastors would tell you literally the opposite. So if you've sat in sermons before that have told you the opposite, I'm sorry. Many would say that this actually hurts your ability to be grateful, but I disagree. So the last thing that I think can help you be better at gratitude is comparison. Comparison. Now you're like, what? I've heard a sermon called Comparison is the Thief of Joy. I've heard it too. It's a good one. Comparison leads to envy and jealousy and discontentment and all those other things. What are you even talking about? Comparison is awful, and it can be awful, and it can be harmful if you're bad at it. I'm accusing you right now. I'm accusing you of being bad at comparison. How about that? Don't even know you. Here, let me explain. See, when you compare, if it's hurting you, when you compare, you only compare up. You only compare up. It's natural. I think we do this naturally, especially in the age of social media and all this stuff. But, you compare with the Smith family that lives down the street that has a yard that looks like they cut it with scissors because it's so perfect. And they got this new car and it's clean on the outside. And then even you see when they open up the door, somehow it's clean on the inside, even though they have kids. And you're like, what is going on there? And you compare that to yours and you're like, oh, and it hurts you, right? Or you see that mom get out of the drop-off line and she looks like she fell out of a Macy's catalog or something. She's like dressed, and you're in your pajamas and Crocs and all that. And you got to, and her kids look like Gap models and their hair is actually combed and not sticking up straight in the back. And you compare to that and you feel worse, right? Or you do that thing where you're on social media and some family went on a vacation and they could do that, post that photo dump. I'm bragging, right? And you accidentally click on it because you want to be miserable and you just start scrolling. And it hurts you, right? Or you see that social media influencers just got millions of dollars and all they do is like tape their kid opening boxes and you're like, that's stupid, and I have a job, right? And then you compare, and you're like, that makes me feel worse. And that kind of comparison will, because all you're doing is comparing up. But let me share this with you. 5 things 5 things if they're true about you. If you live in a first world country, you do, check. If you have access to clean water, you do. If you have access to food, if you can see, hear, and walk, and if you can use a bathroom without help, you are in the top 6.7% of the world. Top 6.7%. That means that 93.3% of the world doesn't have one of those things. And you do. You've got all 5. So what happens when you compare yourself, to the family with the perfect lawn and the car and the mom with the model clothes and the family going on vacation is you're comparing yourself to 6.7% of the world and you're completely ignoring 93.3% of the rest of the world. You're bad at comparison. You're bad. Do better. Compare all the way out. All the way out. If you have food in your fridge and water comes out of your faucet and you have eyes and ears and legs, you're doing real well. They're doing real well. Why are you insisting on only comparing up? Why do you do that? That's not good. That's hurting you. Comparing up only hurts your gratitude. Comparing correctly should help. Matter of fact, I take it past this. This is my personal thing that I do, that I don't just compare to the people who are alive now. 8 billion people alive now. I actually strive to compare myself to every human who's ever lived. See, you're only comparing yourselves to the Smiths down the street. I'm way better at this than you. I'm comparing myself to every single person to ever live. And listen, it'll help. So you know who John D. Rockefeller is? You know that guy? One of the richest guys to ever live, right? He was the 1800s. It's estimated that he had $400 billion in like today's money. Rich. His wealth was the equivalent of 2% of the gross domestic product. Like, it's just crazy money. Had kind of a monopoly on oil, so it was a little bit shady. But really, really rich. Second richest guy during his time had like 15 billion. So he had 4. So like rich people thought he was rich. Like he was the rich, just ridiculous money. But did you know that John D. Rockefeller, one of the richest men to ever live, was in his 40s or 50s before he experienced a hot shower? Because, hot water tanks and indoor plumbing didn't even exist. So he was in his 40s or 50s before he experienced this beautiful thing that you experience every single day of your life. You get under that water and a hot waterfall on demand in your house. You have a hot waterfall on demand in your house. That's crazy. So next time you get in your shower, I just want you to think, hey, John, got you, right? You've got nothing on me, man. Your $400 billion didn't experience this, right? Taking bath like a toddler all the time, right? I have a shower, right? But you can take it past that. You need to consider, just think about the medieval kings and queens who lived in castles thousands of years ago. Think about 1,000 years ago. Sorry, historians are going to get after me. If you could bring a king and queen who lived in a castle and transport them forward in time and walk them around your house, I guarantee they would trade you their castle for your middle-class house. They would. Because you would walk them in and they would be like, what is that hole in the ground and why is there warm air coming out of it in the middle of winter? And I don't see a fire. What are you, magic, right? They'd walk into your kitchen and you'd turn a little dial and water would come out. I'd be like, how are you doing that? You'd flip a switch and they'd be like, candles just turned on in the ceiling, right? They'd open up a box in your fridge or in your kitchen and it'd be cold food in there and then even frozen food in a different part of it, and they would think you were Harry Potter. They'd be blown away by this. They'd look in your front yard and they would see an iron chariot that doesn't require horses. And they would absolutely, without question, instantly trade their life for yours. Instantly. But you just keep comparing to the people who are slightly up from you. Kings and queens don't live like you live. You're all hung up on Sally and her wardrobe. You're comparing bad, man. You need to compare better. Ephesians 5:20 says, and give thanks for everything to God the Father in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Everything. If you include every single human who's ever lived, you are in the top 0.1% of quality of life. 99.9% of humans have lived worse than you live right now. If you want to be really good at comparing, then compare to all of them. Your life is amazing. This is kind of my mental trick that I do with myself. I try to kind of tell myself this stuff when I get in the shower. I'm like, hey, John, I got you, right? And when I wake up in the middle of the night and get some water to drink, I'm like thankful that I didn't have to walk down to a stream to get it, right? When I walked out into the little room where my car lives, I'm grateful that I didn't have to feed it or brush it or put a saddle on it. I'm grateful for that I just go. Right? I try to tell myself like, man, God, thank you for putting me where you put me in this place because you are so good to me, so good to me. When I'm good at comparing, I find things to be grateful for. And I think this verse, when it says give thanks for everything, I think it means to hunt for it. You need to be a person who hunts for things to be grateful for. Big stuff, little stuff. The stuff that if you lost it, you'd spend $1 million to get it back, like your eyesight and your hearing. Little stuff like running water in a furnace and lights. Find stuff to be grateful for and watch it transform you from the inside out. So here's your homework. Do the thing. Get a journal and start finding things to be grateful for. Don't knock it till you've tried it. Start writing stuff down. Start your day with that. Be intentional about it. That's part of the practice. That's part of the focus. That's part of the comparison. You do it right, you'll start to change the way you see the world. It'll improve in here, it'll improve in here, and it'll improve your relationship with God. Pray with me. Lord, I thank you for everything. I pray for the person right now who struggles with this. Lord, maybe they've been in a dark spot and maybe they've only really seen the bad. And it's been hard to be grateful. I pray that you would open their eyes up just a little. Open their heart up just a little. Help them to see some of the good. Help them to be grateful for some of the good. And help that be like a foothold towards the next thing. Progress, practice towards being a grateful person. Lord, I pray for the person who maybe feels like you owe them something and that's maybe been a definer of their relationship with you. Lord, I pray that you would soften their heart on that. They'd unwrap their fingers from around that and approach you different. I pray for us as a church, Lord, that we would be a church that's defined by gratitude, that would be like a descriptor of this group of people, and that would speak to the world about you and how awesome you are. In Jesus' name I pray.